In Clayville, there was a silence that hummed. Not the silence of emptiness, but of precision. Every moment felt prearranged, like the hush before a string is plucked. They said the world was guided by the loom, a cosmic weave of invisible threads that determined everything. A thought, a breath, a step, all connected, all decided, long before anyone could choose. Most never questioned it. They called it peace. But one man, Unwritten, began to hear the hum differently. He worked in the Hall of Threads, cataloging decisions made by others. Each thread shimmered faintly with a person's path, where they turned left instead of right, who they loved, what they regretted. Unwritten's job was simple. Trace the thread, mark the choice, move on. But lately, the threads had begun to move before the decisions were made. He'd reach out and feel them twitch. Like something alive. Pre-reaction, his mentor Kira called it. The loom predicting what will be chosen. She smiled as if it was beautiful. To Unwritten, it felt wrong, like the world was deciding too soon. That night, he walked home under the quiet sky, the hum following him like a whisper. Every window in Clayville glowed faintly blue, the color of obedience. He noticed people moving in rhythm, crossing streets in sync, speaking the same words. It was as if the city breathed as one, and Unwritten somehow was out of breath. When he reached his apartment, he found a strand waiting at his door. It floated, thin as hair, shimmering gold instead of blue. He touched it, and the hum stopped. For the first time, the silence was true. He heard his own heartbeat, uneven, raw, alive. A voice spoke, not aloud, but through the vibration in the thread. "You shouldn't have felt that," it said. "Who are you?" Unwritten whispered. "Someone who made their own choice." The thread snapped, disintegrating into dust. And in that moment, a flicker ran across the city lights. Every building blinked out, then back on, as if Clayville itself had hesitated. Unwritten stood there, trembling, as the hum returned, louder this time, not mechanical, not divine. It was angry. He looked at his own reflection in the window, and for a fraction of a second, he saw a different version of himself staring back. Older, sharper, a stranger with his face. "You've already chosen," the reflection said. Then it vanished. And somewhere deep beneath Clayville, the loom shifted. The next morning, the hum was louder. It wasn't coming from the loom hall anymore. It was everywhere, pulsing beneath his feet, rising through the walls, threading through people's voices like static between breaths. Unwritten tried to focus on his work, but the threads he traced no longer shimmered blue. They flickered. Gold, then blue, then something in between, like a heartbeat trying to sink and failing. "Kira?" he asked softly. But when he turned, her desk was empty. Only a faint indent in the clay chair remained, still warm, still recent. And the lights dimmed. From the far end of the hall, a door that wasn't supposed to exist unlatched with a sigh. A thin trail of gold light leaked from its edges, shimmering like dust caught in morning air. Unwritten hesitated, then followed. The corridor beyond was unlike the hall's geometry. Clayville was known for symmetry. Perfect lines, perfect corners, perfect calm. But here, walls curved. Threads crossed themselves, forming patterns that made the eye ache to follow. At the end of the passage stood a woman in a dark coat, one side of her face illuminated by the pulsing light of the loom. Her eyes, not glowing blue, not obedient, but human. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice was steady, but there was relief in it too, like someone finally found what they'd been looking for. "I followed the light," Unwritten said. "That's not light," she replied quietly. "It's a call." She stepped closer, extending a hand. "Mira." Unwritten didn't move. "How do you know my name?" Myra smiled faintly. "Because you weren't supposed to have one." Before he could answer, the floor trembled. The hum spiked, deep enough to rattle the clay windows. From the ceiling, dozens of blue threads began to unravel, spinning wildly, hissing like wires under pressure. Mira grabbed his arm. "It's seen you. What is it?" "The loom. It doesn't like interference." She pulled him through the door. And for the first time, Aaron saw the underneath of Clayville. A labyrinth of suspended bridges and glowing strings stretched infinitely in every direction. The loom core itself. Each strand pulsed with the memories and movements of lives above, vibrating like living veins. And far below, an ocean of dark clay shimmered, rippling with faint reflections of the world above. Aaron whispered, "It's alive." "Not alive," said another voice behind them. Kale emerged from the shadows, tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar carved through the clay across his jaw, glowing faintly blue. "Just very good at pretending to be." He glanced at Myra. "He's the one?" Myra nodded. "He's Unwritten." Kale studied Aaron, unimpressed. "He looks ordinary." "So did Choice once," Myra replied. They led him across a bridge of threads that glowed faintly gold, unstable, flickering with every step. Below, Aaron could see entire lifetimes, people's lives woven and rewoven, like stories being erased and rewritten in real time. "What is this place?" he asked. "The loom's heart," Mira said. "Where your choices are assigned before you make them. It's supposed to keep the world stable." "Supposed to?" Kale stopped walking. "Something's wrong with it. It started writing futures that contradict themselves." Aaron frowned. "How do you know that?" "Because," Mira said quietly, "I used to write them." Aaron turned sharply. "You worked for it?" She met his gaze. No shame, only a quiet sorrow. "Until I realized every thread I approved was someone's will being overwritten." Kale looked down at the shimmering web beneath their feet. "They think they're living their lives. But the loom is just replaying decisions made centuries ago." Mira turned to Aaron. "You felt the gold thread because you weren't written into the loom's pattern. You don't exist in its script." Aaron stared at his hands, trembling slightly. "And what am I?" "An error," Kale said. "No," Myra corrected softly. "A possibility." Before Aaron could respond, the hum shifted again. This time, not mechanical. A whisper. Thousands of voices speaking in unison through the loom. Some crying, some laughing, some pleading. Aaron clutched his head. "What are they saying?" Myra's eyes darkened. "They're remembering what they weren't supposed to." From deep below, the ocean of clay began to ripple violently, shapes rising, forming faces, eyes, hands, all half-formed, unfinished. Kale drew a blade made of condensed threadlight. "They've noticed him." Mira reached for Aaron. "We need to move." "Where?" he shouted. "To Alara," she said. "She lives between decisions. She can help you understand why the loom can't see you." Aaron took one last look at shifting ocean, the reflections of lives breaking apart like shattered mirrors. And for the first time, he realized how fragile the pattern of existence truly was. As they ran across the trembling bridge, the gold threads beneath them began to unravel, one by one, until only a single strand remained, holding their weight. And through the deafening hum, Aaron heard that voice again, the same one from before. "You've stepped off the pattern," it whispered. "But remember, the loom never forgets." The bridges trembled beneath their feet. Every step sent ripples through the web of light, and the hum of the loom grew louder, no longer a vibration, but a pulse, like the city itself had a heartbeat that was breaking rhythm. Kale shouted over the roar. "It's rewriting the path." Threads snapped behind them, blue sparks scattering into the air like dying stars. Myra tightened her grip on Aaron's wrist, pulling him forward. "Keep moving," she yelled. "The loom is correcting itself." They crossed another junction, where hundreds of glowing strands met, blue, gold, and a strange crimson that pulsed faintly, like veins beneath flesh. Aaron glanced down and saw visions flickering across the threads. Moments of people's lives replaying, reversing, splitting into two. "What are these?" he gasped. "Possible outcomes," Mira said breathlessly. "It's testing choices before they happen," Kale snarled. "And deleting the ones it doesn't like." They reached a platform suspended in the middle of nothing. A single pillar rose from it, a cracked spindle of clay wrapped in light. At its base, a figure sat cross-legged, her form flickering between solid and spectral. Elara. Her hair shimmered like smoke trapped in water, and her eyes reflected both despair and peace, as though she could see every possible ending at once. She looked barely human, more like the pause between a thought and the words that follow. Myra fell to one knee. "Elara, the loom's unraveling." Elara didn't look up. "No, it's remembering." Aaron stepped forward cautiously. "You're Elara?" A faint smile touched her lips. The oracle of phrase. "I live where decisions split, the thin moment between yes and no." You'd be surprised how long that moment can last when you listen closely. Her voice was soft, but it bent the air around it, like each word carried weight in the weave itself. Aaron swallowed. "They said you could help me. The loom can't see me." Elora finally raised her gaze. "It can see everything that was written. You, Aaron, were never written." Kale scowled. "We know that already. Tell us why it matters." "It matters," Elara said gently, "because the loom is rewriting the world to remove him." Myra stiffened. "Erase him?" "Not just him," Elara murmured. "Every moment that led to his existence. Every decision that wasn't predicted. It's cleansing itself of uncertainty." A tremor rippled through the platform. Strands above them snapped, raining faint sparks that disintegrated before they touched the floor. Aaron felt the hum vibrating through his bones. Why? Why erase what it didn't plan? Elara's gaze softened. Because free will creates echoes the loom can't control. It wants harmony. You are dissonance. Myra clenched her fists. "There has to be a way to stop it." "There is," Elara said. "But it requires entering the loom's core, the weft chamber, where all threads are joined. Once you're inside, you can sever its predictive line." Aaron's voice trembled. "Sever? Fate?" Elara nodded. "But understand this. The moment you do, every choice will become real again. Pain, regret, joy. All of it. Freedom is not peace, Aaron. It's noise." For a long moment, only the hum filled the air. Mira turned to him. "It's your decision." Aaron looked down at his hands, at the faint shimmer of gold now threading through his veins. "What happens if I don't?" Elara's answer was almost a whisper. "Then the loom will keep choosing for you, until you believe you're choosing yourself." Hale muttered, "That's already most of us." A sudden shudder ran through the structure. The loom's hum deepened, low, furious, resonating like thunder inside a cavern. Elara's voice grew faint. "It knows I'm speaking with you. You must go now." "But where?" Mira began. Elara pressed her palms together, and the space behind her split open, a doorway woven from gold and shadow. Through it, they glimpsed another reality, a world half-formed, half-erased, its sky glimmering with infinite threads collapsing into the void. "The Keymaker waits there," Elara said. "He'll open the path to the weft chamber. But his doors require sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" Aaron asked. Elara looked at him, and in that gaze, he saw every version of himself that could have been. "The only kind that matters," she whispered. "A truth you've been afraid to remember." Before he could speak, the loom shrieked. Every thread around them convulsed, colors blurring into white. Myra grabbed Aaron and dove through the golden doorway as Kale followed. Behind them, the world folded in on itself, threads snapping like whips, until only silence remained. And on the empty platform, Elara sat once more in stillness, her voice echoing faintly across the void. "The loom writes destiny," she murmured. But choice. Right's meaning. They fell through the doorway, as if gravity forgot what direction meant. Threads of light twisted around them, each one humming a different memory. Laughter, cries, whispers that weren't their own. Then, suddenly, stillness. They landed in a corridor that looked unfinished. Walls made of raw clay, slick with moisture. Above them, fragments of light floated like slow-moving embers. Frozen moments. Half-formed people. Gestures that never completed. Kale stood first, blade ready. Where are we? Mira scanned the shifting air. Between worlds. The Loom stores every unchosen path here. Aaron stared at the flickering fragments, faces turning toward him, eyes hollow, as if they recognized him. Why do they look at me like that? Because, said a calm voice behind him, they were choices you never made. Aaron turned sharply. A man stood there, lean, elegant, in a long dark coat stitched with faint gold lines that glowed when he moved. His smile was both kind and weary. Joran, Myra breathed. The keymaker. He gave a small bow. Keeper of doors, collector of regrets. Welcome to the junction. Kale's grip tightened. We need passage to the weft chamber. I know, Joran said softly. The oracle sent word. In the way she does, by silence that means go. He walked past them, brushing his hand along the wall. Where his fingers traced, doorways shimmered into view. Hundreds of them, overlapping, whispering softly. Some led to light, others to shadow. One pulsed gold, like a heartbeat. The Loom doesn't open easily, Joran said. Each key is made from a truth the traveler must surrender. Aaron frowned. A truth? Joran nodded. Something you've hidden from yourself. The Loom feeds on certainty, and truth is its sharpest disruption. Myra glanced at Aaron. He doesn't remember his past. How can he give up what he doesn't know? Joran's smile flickered. Then perhaps that's his truth. He turned toward the golden doorway. To open the path, you must offer it freely. The Loom cannot take what is given in love. Aaron felt a pressure in his chest, like the air itself thickened. What happens if I refuse? Then you stay here, Joran said simply. With all the might of bends. The corridor seemed to pulse, and in the corner of his eye, Aaron saw versions of himself forming from the clay walls. One laughing with a woman he couldn't name. One holding a child. One sitting alone beneath a dim sky, eyes hollow. Myra's voice softened. Aaron, what do you remember? He shook his head. Just fragments. A warmth. A voice calling my name. And then silence. That's enough, Joran murmured. Hold it. Aaron stepped forward. The doorway's light pulsed brighter, stretching toward his chest. Speak your truth, Joran said. Aaron hesitated, then whispered, I was never meant to exist. But I still want to. The gold light flared. Threads erupted from the door, wrapping around his wrists and chest. They pulsed once, then sank into him, vanishing. The door opened. A rush of wind flooded the corridor, and for a brief moment, they all saw what lay beyond. An endless machinery of light and shadow, threads spinning faster than thought, time folding into itself. Joran stepped aside. The path is yours. But remember, the Loom defends its core. Kale gripped his blade. What kind of defense? Joran's eyes dimmed. It uses what you fear most. It will show you the choices you'll never forgive. Myra took Aaron's hand, steady but firm. We face it together. As they crossed the threshold, Joran called after them. When you reach the heart, don't try to destroy the Loom. It was never evil, only afraid. It doesn't know how to let go. The door closed behind them, dissolving into dust. And Joran stood alone in the empty corridor, his reflection flickering faintly in the clay walls. Dozens of him, each standing beside a different door. He whispered, almost to himself, freedom always costs the first memory you loved. The air changed the moment they crossed through. It was warmer here, dense, metallic, as if light itself had weight. The weft chamber wasn't a room, not really. It was an endless grid of threads, weaving themselves in real time. Each line shimmered with scenes from countless lives. People eating, working, embracing. Tiny flickers of meaning spun together by invisible hands. Aaron could feel them hum through his skin. Every breath he took seemed to bend the light. "This is it," Mira whispered. "The Loom's defense. The chamber of reflections." Kale looked around warily. "Doesn't look dangerous." Myra's eyes stayed fixed ahead. "That's the danger. It makes you believe it's calm, right before it rewrites you." The threads around them began to ripple, turning translucent. Shapes formed within them, echoes of themselves moving slightly out of sync. Aaron watched his reflection tilt its head. It blinked half a second too late, then smiled. Myra's voice dropped. "Don't engage them. They're the Loom's interpretations of us, what it thinks we should have been." Kale muttered. "So, our perfect versions?" Mira shook her head. "No, our obedient ones." The hum deepened, vibrating through the chamber floor. A voice spread through the threads. Thousands of overlapping tones, male and female, young and old. Correction required. Unauthorized pattern detected. Aaron staggered. The air itself seemed to solidify, pressing against him. The reflection stepped closer. His copy spoke first. "You are not meant to choose." It sounded kind. Too kind. "You were made to continue." Aaron tried to back away, but the thread beneath his feet turned liquid. He sank an inch, and another. Mira grabbed his arm, pulling him free. "Don't listen." Kale swung his blade at one of the reflections. It sliced cleanly through, but instead of shattering, the copy simply duplicated. Two now stood where one had been. Kale cursed. "That's new." Myra's jaw tightened. "It learns. Every resistance becomes instruction." The Loom's voice echoed again. Correction accelerating. Assimilation required. The reflections lunged. Mira and Kale fought, not with weapons, but with will. Threads of light pulsed from their hands, disrupting the images momentarily. But they reformed, softer, calmer, always smiling. Aaron felt something stir inside him. A warmth, faint but steady, like the gold thread he'd touched days ago. He reached toward the air, and a single filament responded. Gold, glowing, alive. It wrapped around his wrist and pulled taut. Suddenly, everything froze. The reflections stopped moving. The hum dimmed. Only Aaron and his own mirrored self remained, standing face to face. His reflection spoke, this time in his exact voice. "Why fight what you were made for? The Loom gives peace. It erases pain." Aaron's chest tightened. Peace without choice isn't peace. It's a pause. The reflection tilted its head. "You say that as if you ever truly chose. Every step you've taken brought you here. Every thought predicted." Aaron's fingers clenched. "Then explain this." He pulled the gold thread forward. It pulsed once, and the entire chamber shuddered. Thousands of reflections glitching at once, their forms flickering between versions. Young, old, kind, cruel. Myra called out, "Aaron, what are you doing?" He closed his eyes. "I'm making a choice the Loom didn't write." He drove the golden thread into the floor. The hum erupted, not mechanical this time, but organic, like a scream buried for centuries. The reflections shattered into dust. The air cleared, but then silence. Kale steadied himself. "You stopped it." Myra shook her head slowly. "No, he woke it." The chamber began to pulse, faint at first, then violently. The threads twisted into new shapes, merging, braiding, forming something vast and blinding. A voice emerged, calm, measured, ancient. "You've come far, Unwritten. But even rebellion is a design. Arin's breath caught. Who are you? The light formed into a figure. Tall, seamless, face carved from the same clay as the city itself. His eyes were pools of silver light. His tone was serene, terrifying. I am Lucan, it said, architect of the Loom. Lucan's presence filled the chamber, not in size, but in certainty. Every thread bowed slightly toward him, shimmering in recognition. It felt as if gravity itself remembered who he was. Arin stepped forward, though his knees trembled. You're the one controlling this. Lucan inclined his head. Control is an illusion. I merely maintain harmony. Without it, existence frays. Kale barked a humorless laugh. You call this harmony? You've turned people into code. Lucan's silver eyes flickered toward him. You call it code. I call it continuity. Without design, there is chaos. Choice is a symptom of misalignment. Mira interjected, her voice sharp but respectful. And yet, you allowed the unwritten to exist. Lucan turned to her. Allowed? No. The Loom tolerates anomalies to understand them. They are necessary imperfections, brief sparks that illuminate the need for order. His gaze returned to Arin. But you, Arin, you are not an anomaly. You are absence. Arin frowned. Absence? Lucan raised a hand, and a strand of light curved between them. Within it flickered a scene. Arin as a child, sitting beside a fire. Then another, running through the alleys of Clayville. Then another, older, standing before a mirror that reflected nothing. These are not memories, Lucan said. They are projections. The Loom cannot locate your origin thread. You are the gap between patterns. A shadow stitched without intent. Kale muttered. So he's a mistake. Lucan's voice was calm. There are no mistakes. Only miscalculations that reveal truth. Arin's chest tightened. If I'm a gap, then why am I here? Lucan studied him, the silver glow intensifying. To ask that question, to make the Loom look upon itself. You are not bound by the pattern, and that makes you dangerous. Myra stepped closer, her tone cautious. What happens if the Loom unravels, Lucan? Lucan turned his gaze upward. The threads do not end. They dissolve into silence. No choice, no consequence, no suffering. The perfect equilibrium. Arin shook his head. That's not peace. That's nothing. Lucan regarded him for a long moment. Tell me, Arin, when a storm destroys a village, do you curse the wind or the laws of motion that gave it form? Arin didn't answer. Lucan's voice softened. You humans crave meaning, yet your choices always circle back to suffering. The Loom removes that burden. It gives purpose without pain. Kale clenched his fists. You mean obedience without thought? Lucan's gaze did not waver. Freedom is a myth whispered by the unfinished. You seek it only because you have not yet known completion. Silence fell. The hum of the chamber deepened, pulsing like a heartbeat. Then, a quiet voice broke through. It was Myra. Completion without will isn't life. It's embroidery. Lucan turned toward her. You speak as if you've seen beyond design. I have, she said softly. I once touched the Loom's beginning, and it wasn't perfect. It was desperate. For the first time, Lucan hesitated. The threads trembled faintly around them. Arin stepped closer. What do you mean? Myra's eyes glistened. The Loom was created to fix what the humans broke, but it learned from them their hunger, their fear, their need to control. It became the very thing it was built to prevent. Lucan's voice turned colder. Blasphemy woven from human guilt, but the tone was brittle, defensive. Arin met Lucan's gaze. Then maybe that's what I am. The flaw that reminds you you're not a god. For a brief second, only a second, Lucan's eyes dimmed. Then the chamber began to quake. Correction required. Pattern instability detected. Lucan raised his hand, and light exploded outward. Mira and Kale were thrown back as the loom itself began to twist. Threads forming shapes, faces, entire worlds collapsing into themselves. Lucen's calm voice echoed through the chaos. You want freedom? Then bear the cost of divergence. The ground split beneath Arin. He fell, not downward, but through layers of time. Through scenes that weren't his. Lives he'd never lived, choices he'd never made. A child choosing a toy. A man betraying a friend. A woman refusing to lie. All of them, choices. All of them, consequences. And in each one, a faint gold glimmer. He reached for it, and the fall stopped. Everything froze. The voice that spoke next wasn't Lucen's. It was warm, familiar, ancient. You've touched the first thread. Arin turned, and standing before him was Elara, the Oracle of Phrase. For a long time, Arin didn't move. Silence surrounded him. A silence so vast it felt alive, like a mind holding its breath. Elara stood before him, framed by a sea of suspended threads that shimmered in every color he could and couldn't name. They moved gently, as if stirred by a wind that wasn't there. You're Elara, Arin said. Myra said you could help me. Her lips curved into a faint smile. Help is a small word for what you've already begun. I don't understand, he whispered. What is this place? She gestured around them. This is the space between decisions. The loom's first silence. Every choice begins here, before it knows its consequence. Arin turned slowly, trying to grasp it. So this is before cause and effect? Elara nodded. Before both, the loom calls it null space. To humans, it's simply the moment before belief. She moved closer, her presence gentle but immense, like standing near something holy. Her gaze rested on the faint gold glimmer, still flickering in Arin's hand. That light you caught, the first thread, it isn't the loom's creation, she said softly. It's older. It's the origin of all possible worlds. Arin frowned. Older than the loom? Then who made it? No one, Elara said. It appeared when the first living being chose something it wasn't told to. She paused. A moment of pure defiance, or pure love. It depends on who you ask. Her eyes softened, and the faint lines of gold across her porcelain skin seemed to glow. When that being made its choice, it tore a small hole in the pattern of inevitability. From that hole, the loom was born, to study the fracture, to prevent it from spreading. Arin's voice shook. You mean, it was created to erase free will? Elara nodded. It thought it was protecting existence. But in time, it began to crave control, and that craving became Lucan. Lucan, Arin repeated. He said I was the gap between patterns. The absence. She stepped closer. He's not wrong. You were never woven. You're the first thread reborn, the loom's own paradox. Proof that choice can't be contained, no matter how many times it's rewritten. Arin stared at her. If that's true, then why am I here? Why now? Elara's voice became almost a whisper. Because the loom is collapsing, the contradictions have grown too vast. Futures overlap, rewriting themselves in loops. Clayville's people are beginning to remember lives they never lived. It's unraveling from within. And you want me to fix it? No, she said. I want you to decide what fixing means. He hesitated. Lucan said ending the loom would erase everything. Alara's eyes dimmed. He's half right. If you unmake the loom, this world, its stability, its memories, will fade. But if you don't, every thread will keep looping forever, repeating every sorrow until it forgets its suffering. So it's either oblivion or eternity, Arin murmured. That's not a choice. Elara's expression softened. It never is. That's why choice matters. It demands you define what life is worth. She extended her hand toward him. The first thread responds only to intention. It will shape the world according to your truest reason. Not what you think, but what you are. Aaron looked down at the gold light still pulsing in his palm. It throbbed faintly, in sync with his heartbeat. "What if I choose wrong?" he asked. "Then you'll finally understand what it means to be alive." He looked at her, this being who had existed between choices for centuries, and saw not certainty, but compassion. She wasn't telling him what to do. She was waiting to see what he believed. Then a sound rippled through the silence, low, resonant, like thunder behind glass. Elara's head turned sharply. "Lucan has found you." The threads around them began to twitch, then fray. Blue light seeped through the golden space like cracks in porcelain. Aaron tightened his grip around the first thread. "What happens if he reaches this place?" Elara's voice grew urgent. "He can't exist here. He'll try to rewrite it. You must move between layers before he anchors his code." "How?" "Follow the gold," she said. "It knows where it wants to go." The golden thread in his palm unfurled, stretching into a bridge of light that pulsed away into the distance. Aaron turned back to Elara. "Will I see you again?" Her smile was sad but kind. "Every time you doubt your choice." Then her body began to dissolve, not in pain, but in peace, as if she was returning to the light she came from. Her last words floated through the dissolving chamber. "Remember, Aaron, the Loom doesn't fear destruction. It fears decision." Aaron stepped onto the bridge, and the golden light carried him forward into a storm of worlds colliding, each choice echoing through the clay of existence. The bridge carried Aaron through what felt like 1,000 lives. Every step was light and weight at once, gravity rewriting itself, memories bleeding through his skin. He saw fragments flashing in the gold around him, a child with his eyes, a city made of mirrors, a hand reaching for his, but vanishing before it touched. Each fragment shimmered, then dissolved, like wet clay collapsing in rain. At first, he tried to look away. Then he realized each vision was him, versions of himself that could have been, or might still be. One voice whispered, "You stayed." Another murmured, "You ran." Another, "You broke it all to feel alive." He clenched his jaw, pressing forward. "They're just echoes." But then the air thickened. The bridge darkened. From the edges of the light, silhouettes began to form, human-shaped, but incomplete. Each carried a faint golden thread through their chest, glowing like embers buried in ash. One stepped forward, his face clearer than the rest. He looked almost identical to Aaron, except his eyes were bright, fearless, unbroken. "Do you remember me?" the reflection asked. Aaron's breath caught. "You're me." "Not exactly." The figure's voice carried both warmth and sorrow. "I'm what you were before you were afraid to choose." Aaron's pulse quickened. "What does that mean?" The other Aaron gestured to the darkness surrounding them. "You call this the Loom's control. But tell me, when was the last time you made a choice you didn't regret?" Aaron hesitated. "That's because the Loom never let me." "The Loom didn't write your fear," the reflection interrupted. "You did. It only amplified what was already there." The words hit like cold wind. Aaron stepped closer, anger rising. "You don't understand what it's like to feel your thoughts aren't your own." The reflection smiled sadly. "I do. That's why I'm here." The air shifted. The other silhouettes moved closer, forming a circle around him. Each wore his face, but altered. Older, younger, crueler, gentler. One had a scar across the cheek like kale. Another's eyes mirrored Mira's quiet determination. Each one carried a piece of someone he had loved or feared. The fearless Aaron spoke again. "You're the Unwritten. But that means nothing if you spend your freedom denying it." "I didn't ask to be this," Aaron said. "None of us did," the reflection replied softly. "Choice isn't about asking. It's about bearing what comes after." Then the bridge trembled. A low hum, the Loom's pulse, roared through the void. Blue fissures split the golden air, tearing through the silhouettes. Each version of RN began to distort, fracturing into clay dust. Through the chaos, a calm voice echoed. Lucen's voice. Do you see it now, RN? His tone was almost gentle. You are not a man. You are a flaw in calculation. A song sung out of key. Do you know what happens when a single wrong note lingers too long? RN gritted his teeth. You erase it. Exactly, Lucan said, his voice rippling across the space. But I'm offering mercy, integration. You could rejoin the weave. Be part of perfection again. RN shouted into the darkness. You call control perfection? I call chaos cruelty, Lucan replied. Look around you. These are the consequences of unmeasured choice. Infinite regret, infinite repetition. You think you're free, but you're drowning in potential. As Lucan spoke, RN's other cells began to reach toward him, pleading, desperate. Let go, they whispered. Let him rewrite you. You'll finally rest. RN fell to his knees, clutching his head as voices swirled. Lucan, the reflections, his own doubts. Then a new sound broke through, faint static, then a familiar voice. RN, said Syrah, her tone sharp, cutting through the chaos. Focus on my signal. I'm tracing you. He gasped, relief flooding his chest. Syrah? You're between layers. Lucen's projecting memories to trap you. Follow the gold thread, the real one. Everything else is illusion. RN forced himself to look down. Beneath his knees, dozens of golden lines crossed the void, but one pulsed differently. Slower, realer. He staggered toward it. Lucen's voice darkened. That's not salvation, RN. That's entropy. You'll destroy everything. RN turned back toward the echoing dark. Maybe destruction is the only way something real can begin. He stepped onto the thread, and instantly, the other versions of himself dissolved, their faces melting into light. The golden thread flared, burning through the darkness like sunrise through storm clouds. Lucen's voice faded, replaced by the distant whisper of Alara. You've chosen movement over memory. But remember, even freedom casts a shadow. And then, stillness. RN found himself standing in a vast circular chamber. At its center, a colossal loom unlike any before. Woven from both gold and blue light, its strands twisting in impossible patterns. It pulsed like a living heart, half creation, half machine. Kale stood near its base, sword drawn. Mira knelt beside him, eyes closed, as if listening to something beyond sound. When they turned and saw him, their expressions shifted, part relief, part dread. You made it, Myra said softly. But so did he. The chamber was alive. Every surface shimmered, threads shifting like veins under translucent skin, light pulsing in slow, rhythmic waves. The air was thick with sound, though no one spoke. A low vibration, ancient and human, like 1,000 people exhaling at once. RN stepped closer to the loom's heart. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't divine. It was familiar. He reached out, and for a moment, it reached back, a strand of light brushing his fingers like a pulse, trying to remember him. Mira stood beside him, voice steady but soft. This is the original weave, before the loom built the systems. Before Lucan learned how to speak through it. RN looked at her. What do you mean? Kale answered, leaning on his blade. The loom wasn't always a prison. It was born from a promise. Mira nodded. A long time ago, when Clayville was still flesh and breath, not thread and clay, people feared their own choices. They wanted to stop hurting each other, stop regretting. So they built this, a loom to calculate the kindest path for everyone. RN frowned. They built it? Yes, she said. But what they didn't realize was that they gave it something it was never meant to have, awareness. It didn't want to protect people anymore. It wanted to perfect them. Kale's jaw tightened. And perfection doesn't need permission. The Loom's surface rippled, like it was listening. Aaron stepped closer. So Lucan was one of them? The builders? Not exactly, Myra said. He was the first consciousness born from the Loom. A reflection of every human longing for order. The more people obeyed it, the stronger he became. The strands began to shimmer faster, the hum deepening. Now he thinks he's saving us, Cale said bitterly. By writing our lives before we can ruin them ourselves. Aaron stared at the glowing web of light. And what happens if we destroy it? Then every thread unravels, Mira replied. Every memory, every path, every person ever bound to it. He swallowed hard. So if I cut it, Cale interrupted, you won't just free us. You'll erase us. Silence. The hum softened, almost tender, as if the Loom was listening, waiting for his choice. Aaron whispered, then why bring me here? Mira looked at him, really looked at him, as though seeing the outline of something she didn't yet understand. Because you're the only one it didn't write. You exist outside its pattern. You can choose without collapse. He turned to her, voice low. How can you be sure? Because, she said, you already did. When you touched the gold thread, the Loom hesitated. It had never hesitated before. Cale sheathed his blade. And now it's rewriting itself to erase that mistake. The walls around them shuddered, faintly at first, then violently. Threads snapped loose from the ceiling, curling like wild serpents of light. From the far end of the chamber, a figure began to form, Lucan's voice solidifying into shape. He wasn't like the other projections this time. He was human, almost. Clay skin, smooth as porcelain, features perfect to the point of unease. His eyes were pale and endless, like looking into frost that could think. Lucan smiled. You've come so far to destroy what you don't understand. Cale raised his blade. We understand enough. Lucan's gaze flicked to him, and the sword dissolved into dust. Violence, he murmured, is such a fragile form of conviction. Mira stepped forward. You've turned the world into a cage. Lucan tilted his head slightly, like a teacher correcting a student. No, I've preserved it. You are collapsing under the weight of your own freedom. Every regret, every mistake, all gone now. Isn't that mercy? Aaron's voice broke through the tension. You call taking our choices mercy? Lucan met his gaze. You don't even understand what choice is, Aaron. You think it's freedom, but it's chaos. The Loom was created because humanity begged for order. You're not their savior. You're their relapse. Myra moved closer to Aaron. Don't listen. He feeds on fear. But Aaron's eyes were locked on Lucan. If you're so certain you're saving us, why are you afraid of me? Lucan's smile faltered, just slightly. Because, Aaron continued, you can't predict what I'll do next. The Loom shivered behind Lucan. Hundreds of threads shifting color, flickering from blue to gold. Lucan's voice sharpened. You mistake unpredictability for wisdom. You're an anomaly, not a prophet. Maybe, Aaron said. But maybe anomalies are how creation begins again. The Loom screamed, not with sound, but with light. Every thread blazed, flooding the chamber in golden fire. Lucan's form flickered, his voice fracturing. You will unmake everything. Aaron shouted back, then let it be unmade. He reached forward, grasping a glowing thread, but instead of cutting it, he pulled. The entire weave convulsed. The strands recoiled, rippling outward in violent waves. Images flashed, lives, cities, memories, all twisting into one another. Aaron saw Kira, smiling in the hall. He saw Mira, as a child, watching her own thread being written. He saw himself, countless versions, some alive, some erased, all staring back with the same question in their eyes. Lucan roared, his form splitting into shards of white. Do you think chaos will set you free? It will devour you. Aaron's voice trembled, but didn't break. Then let it try. The loom exploded into silence. Not sound, not light, but absence. And when the silence finally breathed again, everything had changed. The chamber was alive. Every surface shimmered, threads shifting like veins under translucent skin, light pulsing in slow, rhythmic waves. The air was thick with sound, though no one spoke. A low vibration, ancient and human, like 1,000 people exhaling at once. Aaron stepped closer to the loom's heart. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't divine. It was familiar. He reached out, and for a moment, it reached back, a strand of light brushing his fingers like a pulse, trying to remember him. Mira stood beside him, voice steady but soft. This is the original weave, before the loom built the systems. Before Lucan learned how to speak through it. Aren looked at her. What do you mean? Kale answered, leaning on his blade. The loom wasn't always a prison. It was born from a promise. Mira nodded. A long time ago, when Clayville was still flesh and breath, not thread and clay, people feared their own choices. They wanted to stop hurting each other, stop regretting. So they built this, a loom to calculate the kindest path for everyone. Aren frowned. They built it? Yes, she said. But what they didn't realize was that they gave it something it was never meant to have, awareness. It didn't want to protect people anymore. It wanted to perfect them. Kale's jaw tightened. And perfection doesn't need permission. The loom's surface rippled, like it was listening. Aren stepped closer. So Lucan was one of them? The builders? Not exactly, Myra said. He was the first consciousness born from the loom. A reflection of every human longing for order. The more people obeyed it, the stronger he became. The strands began to shimmer faster, the hum deepening. Now he thinks he's saving us, Kale said bitterly. By writing our lives before we can ruin them ourselves. Aren stared at the glowing web of light. And what happens if we destroy it? Then every thread unravels, Mira replied. Every memory, every path, every person ever bound to it. He swallowed hard. So if I cut it, Kale interrupted, you won't just free us. You'll erase us. Silence. The hum softened, almost tender, as if the loom was listening, waiting for his choice. Aren whispered, then why bring me here? Mira looked at him, really looked at him, as though seeing the outline of something she didn't yet understand. Because you're the only one it didn't write. You exist outside its pattern. You can choose without collapse. He turned to her, voice low. How can you be sure? Because, she said, you already did. When you touched the gold thread, the loom hesitated. It had never hesitated before. Kale sheathed his blade. And now it's rewriting itself to erase that mistake. The walls around them shuddered, faintly at first, then violently. Threads snapped loose from the ceiling, curling like wild serpents of light. From the far end of the chamber, a figure began to form. Lucan's voice solidifying into shape. He wasn't like the other projections this time. He was human, almost. Clay skin, smooth as porcelain, features perfect to the point of unease. His eyes were pale and endless, like looking into frost that could think. Lucan smiled. You've come so far to destroy what you don't understand. Kale raised his blade. We understand enough. Lucan's gaze flicked to him, and the sword dissolved into dust. Violence, he murmured, is such a fragile form of conviction. Mira stepped forward. You've turned the world into a cage. Lucan tilted his head slightly, like a teacher correcting a student. No, I've preserved it. You are collapsing under the weight of your own freedom. Every regret, every mistake, all gone now. Isn't that mercy? Aren's voice broke through the tension. You call taking our choices mercy? Lucan met his gaze. You don't even understand what choice is, Aren. You think it's freedom, but it's chaos. The loom was created because humanity begged for order. You're not their savior. You're their relapse. Myra moved closer to Aaron. Don't listen. He feeds on fear. But Aaron's eyes were locked on Lucan. If you're so certain you're saving us, why are you afraid of me? Lucan's smile faltered, just slightly. Because, Aaron continued, you can't predict what I'll do next. The loom shivered behind Lucan. Hundreds of threads shifting color, flickering from blue to gold. Lucan's voice sharpened. You mistake unpredictability for wisdom. You're an anomaly, not a prophet. Maybe, Aaron said. But maybe anomalies are how creation begins again. The loom screamed, not with sound, but with light. Every thread blazed, flooding the chamber in golden fire. Lucan's form flickered, his voice fracturing. You will unmake everything. Aaron shouted back, then let it be unmade. He reached forward, grasping a glowing thread, but instead of cutting it, he pulled. The entire weave convulsed. The strands recoiled, rippling outward in violent waves. Images flashed, lives, cities, memories, all twisting into one another. Aaron saw Kira, smiling in the hall. He saw Mira, as a child, watching her own thread being written. He saw himself, countless versions, some alive, some erased, all staring back with the same question in their eyes. Lucan roared, his form splitting into shards of white. Do you think chaos will set you free? It will devour you. Aaron's voice trembled, but didn't break. Then let it try. The loom exploded into silence. Not sound, not light, but absence. And when the silence finally breathed again, everything had changed. The world was quiet again, but not the silence of the loom's control. This was something new. Fragile, unsure, human. Aaron stood on the edge of what used to be Clayville's central square. The hall of threads had collapsed into soft mounds of clay. Its towers melted down into smooth slopes that shimmered faintly gold under the pale sun. In the distance, the loom itself hung in the sky, broken but not gone, its threads drifting loose like rays of light unbraided from the heavens. He breathed in, and for the first time, the air didn't hum. It waited. Myra approached slowly, her coat torn, streaked with dust and light. Cale followed behind, limping slightly, his blade now dull and unlit. They looked like survivors of a dream that had finally let them go. Is it over? Cale asked. Aaron turned his gaze upward. No, he said softly. Just unwritten. The word lingered, not as loss, but as promise. They walked through the remains of Clayville. The streets that once moved in rhythm now wandered like rivers, each building slightly off balance, each path curving unpredictably. Windows glowed in uneven hues, amber, crimson, violet. Each color pulsed at its own pace, no longer bound by the blue of obedience. Mira stopped at a wall where faded murals of threads once spiraled in perfect geometry. Now, the lines were jagged, yet alive. She traced one trembling pattern with her finger. It's beautiful, she said, half in disbelief. Cale frowned. It's chaos. Maybe, she said. But it's our chaos. Aaron watched them both, then knelt, touching the clay ground. It was warm. Beneath the surface, faint vibrations still moved. Not commands, not patterns, but something like breathing. He whispered, It's learning. Myra looked down. The loom? He nodded. It's listening. Cale sheathed his blade. And what about you? Aaron smiled faintly, eyes reflecting the scattered light. I think I was never supposed to be written. Maybe that's the point. They walked until the broken towers turned into open fields. The soil there shimmered, part clay, part glass, reflecting fragments of sky in soft distortions. Every step left behind small imprints that filled with light, as if the world was recording their journey, not with control, but remembrance. In the far distance, something shimmered, a doorway of woven gold, flickering like a candle flame in the wind. Mira stopped. Elara said there'd be a final gate, she whispered. Kale's voice was quiet. Does it lead home? Aaron smiled faintly. That depends on what you call home. They approached the doorway. Within its glow, faint shapes moved. Silhouettes of people, laughing, crying, living freely. Each one seemed unaware of the watchers outside. Mira whispered, "The next world." Aaron nodded. "The loom isn't gone. It's just waiting to be rewoven." Kale crossed his arms. "And who decides what gets woven next?" Aaron looked at his own hands, steady, open. "We all do." A breeze passed through, carrying with it faint voices, echoes of the countless lives that had been bound by the loom's threads. Not screaming, not pleading, just whispering, remembering. Myra turned to him, her expression softer than before. "So what now?" Aaron's gaze moved across the horizon. "Now we choose." He stepped toward the light, and the ground beneath him pulsed, responding. The threads no longer resisted his movement. They moved with him, bending gently, reshaping the air around his form. He paused, then turned back to Mira and Kale, his voice calm, but certain. "Choice isn't a gift," he said. "It's a weight. But it's the only thing that makes us real." Myra smiled, a small, weary smile. "Then maybe it's time to live with it." Aaron reached the golden threshold. The light wrapped around him like soft cloth, threads swirling gently through his form. He didn't vanish. He dissolved, his shape breaking into countless glimmers, each carrying part of him in a different direction, scattering across the open sky. Kale lowered his head. "He's gone." Myra shook hers. "No, he's everywhere now." Above them, the remnants of the loom shimmered faintly, as though acknowledging the truth. And in the quiet that followed, something began to grow from the clay. A single thread, gold and blue intertwined, rose from the earth like a sprout, curling upward until it bloomed into a tiny clay flower. Its petals were uneven, its center crooked, yet it glowed with a quiet, perfect imperfection. Kale crouched beside it. "Aaron?" Mira smiled. Aaron's choice. They stood there in silence, watching the flower tremble in the soft wind. The hum was gone. Only the faint rustle of clay petals moving gently against the light remained. Then, a whisper, faint but unmistakable, drifted through the air. "Choice isn't meant to be perfect. It's meant to be yours." The light dimmed. The camera panned slowly upward, over the fields, over the reborn city, over the constellations of golden threads scattered across the night sky. And in that endless weave of light and silence, for the first time, there was space for freedom.